And the filmmaker who secretly recorded Supreme Court Justice Alito is denying accusations that she baited him in her conversation, which was where she misrepresented herself. And she's explaining why she went undercover.
When you have a Supreme Court that is shrouded in secrecy and doing its best to avoid any ethics accountability, I think that extreme measures are warranted.
Here's part of the secret recording from the Supreme Court Historical Society's annual dinner last week, where she walked up to him and started chatting with him. She also chatted up the Chief Justice Roberts. So the first voice you're going to hear her is hers. This is the activist who posed as a conservative Catholic for the purposes of this conversation.
As a Catholic and as someone who really cherishes my faith, I don't know that we can negotiate with the left in the way that needs to happen for the polarization to end. I think that it's a matter of winning.
I think you're probably right. On one side or the other is going to win. I don't know. I mean, there can be a way of working, a way of living together peacefully, but it's difficult, because there are differences on fundamental things that really can't be compromised.
I think that the solution really is winning the moral argument. People in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that, to return our country to a place of godliness.
Oh, I agree with you.
So the Wall Street Journal editorial board wrote this today. This is no scandal or even revelation. It is a common observation that the United States is polarized on fundamental values. How many years have voters been told this is the most important election of their lifetimes? A judge in the United States is free to acknowledge his religious beliefs out loud in public. With that, we bring in Fox News Sunday anchor Shannon Bream, our chief legal correspondent who reached out to the Supreme Court for a response to this recording. Shannon, welcome. Good to have you here. What did you hear back when you reached out on all of this?
Well, the court is not officially commenting on what happened here. We have heard from the Historical Society, though, that hosted this dinner. It's something they do every year. Obviously very upset that the tenor of the dinner is to give transparency for people to be able to talk about the court as an institution, to have interaction with the justices. And obviously people fear that this is the kind of stuff that will make justices even less transparent, even less accessible to people. I've talked to several people involved with this story off the record. My sense is they may not comment publicly because they don't want to feel like they're feeding the narrative or these stories that keep happening. And keep in mind, there are people on the left, including the Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Dick Durbin, who has been very critical of Justice Alito, of the court. Even he, Martha, seems uncomfortable with the way that these recordings came about. And if you're somebody who follows Justice Alito at all, including a recent graduation speech he gave, none of this will be surprising to you because this is the kind of stuff he says publicly. Yeah,
absolutely. None other than Sunny Hostin said this was a hit job on The View. An interesting response from her. Watch this.
I'm extremely disappointed at what I heard, but I also am not comfortable with snippets of tape recordings without consent being taken out of context. I didn't hear everything. And so I'm uncomfortable with this sort of hit job.
Also, the woman who recorded this talked to Justice Alito's wife about the flags that were flown at their home. And the Wall Street Journal said this: the only actual news from her surreptitious recordings is that Justice Samuel Alito's wife corroborated that he isn't responsible for whatever flags have flown at his homes. She said that was on her. Shannon, just in terms of understanding that people can have their opinions and their thoughts on things, but they're nominated to the Supreme Court for their ability to put that aside and to make decisions based on the law, right?
They are. They are. And the fact is, if you go back and look at some of Justice Alito's jurisprudence, of course, there's a ton there that the left is not going to like. Sure. But when you look at what happened in 2020 and some of the cases the court could have taken up getting involved with what happened in the wake of the election, he didn't do that. If people say, listen, he's there to overturn elections and to benefit Trump only, he could have been in position to offer different votes and do different things. That didn't happen in the wake of 2020. And, you know, I think back to years ago, you and I and many people on the channel covered the undercover recordings of David Daleiden when he spoke to people who worked for Planned Parenthood, and the left was furious about that. They did not like that those things they said were edited, were taken out of context, that the people that he spoke with didn't have a fair and accurate representation of the conversation he was having with them. I don't see that same kind of outrage this time around.
Yeah, I mean, you know, she clearly has a perspective here. She's not against justices who might speak their mind on something, I would imagine, because if she were to do the same thing to some of the more liberal members of the court, they may say things about protecting the right to an abortion that she might be on the same page with, but nonetheless, they would be expressing their opinion about a very polarizing subject before the United States right now. So, I mean, it's clear that there are some things that she doesn't want judges talking about and other things that she might really back 100%.
Right. And if you're talking about ideas of religion, Justice Alito and his wife have been openly, devoutly Catholic for decades. That's not been secret from the public stage. And he talks often about attacks on religious liberty. And again, as he did just weeks ago in that graduation speech, not a surprise that he does think a return to faith might help this country. But he doesn't talk about any specific case in that.
Are we going to get the immunity decision this week, Shannon, before I let you go?
For President
we get
Trump? Decisions Thursday and Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll give you them as soon as we get them.
Okay. Well, you're the person we're going to turn to as soon as that happens. Thank you so much. Shannon, great to see you. Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.